It was the second night of the trip. We had hiked deeper into the northern Cascades than we probably should have, farther than any cell tower could reach, farther than even the rangers said people usually go. We were 5, me, Alex, Jamie, Lena, and Connor. We set up our tents near a narrow stream, surrounded by nothing but trees and damp silence. It was cold and dark, the kind of dark that feels thicker the longer you sit in it. After dinner, we stayed up a bit, passed around the usual stores, then zipped into our tents. I remember checking my watch before lying down. It was 11:42 p.m. Sometime after midnight, I heard Connor unzip his tent. The quiet sound of his boots stepping through pine needles faded quickly into the distance. I assumed he was going to relieve himself. The trees were dense here, but we'd all done the same the night before. Just walk far enough away to not be seen, then head back. Only Connor didn't come back. At first, none of us noticed. We all drifted in and out of sleep, still a little buzzed from the cold and the beer. But when I woke up around 3 a.m. and heard only the stream and the wind, I realized something was off. Connor's tent was still open. His flashlight was gone. I waited. By sunrise, his spot was still empty. We spent the morning shouting for him. At first light, we assumed he'd wandered a little too far, maybe followed the stream out of earshot. But the forest seemed to swallow our voices. The trees were too dense, the fog too heavy. By noon, Lena was already pale, clutching the GPS like it could save us. We found nothing, no broken branches, no footprints, no sounds. By 3 p.m., we activated the emergency beacon, one of those bright orange plastic bricks that's supposed to alert SAR helicopters. We followed protocol, stayed put, conserved food, waited. When night fell again, Connor's tent still stood open. But the forest felt tighter now. The silence had changed. There was no wind anymore, just waiting and watching. We expected helicopters the next morning. Instead, we got nothing. No sound overhead. No voices calling his name through a megaphone. Just the hum of the stream and the slow, steady burn of fear curling into our lungs. We tried to reassure each other, said maybe the signal hadn't gone through. Maybe the trees were too dense. Maybe help would come tomorrow. But tomorrow looked exactly the same. The air started to feel heavier. Not colder, just denser, as if the trees were leaning closer, listening. The usual sounds of the forest, birds, insects, even squirrels, had gone strangely quiet. We didn't notice it at first, but by the second afternoon, even the stream began to sound unnatural. Not wrong, just mechanical, like someone playing a recording of running water. We were starting to come apart. Lena refused to sleep. She sat by the fire all night, staring into the dark with a bare spray can clutched to her chest. Jamie kept checking the GPS over and over, even though the screen only ever blinked back nitrogen monoxide signal. Alex talked about hiking back the way we came, but none of us remembered exactly which direction that was anymore. The trail markers had been scarce, and we'd taken several forks in search of a perfect spot. A good, quiet place to disconnect. We got exactly what we asked for. On the fourth morning, I woke to find Connor's boots placed neatly in front of his tent. Laces tied, still dusty, still warm from the sun. None of us had touched them. Lena threw up in the bushes and didn't speak for the rest of the day. Jamie cried once, just a single dry sob, then stared blankly at the treetops until night fell. That night, We didn't start a fire. We sat in our tents with our headlamps off, barely breathing, listening to something moving slowly through the underbrush. Not an animal. Not quite a person, but something that knew we were waiting. We lasted 2 more days. No rescue, no signal. Just the same stillness, the same pressing quiet that felt like it was growing under our skin. Alex snapped first. On the 5th morning, he packed his bag and told us, without saying a word, that he was leaving. Just zipped up, hoisted his gear, and walked into the tree line without turning back. He took the GPS. It didn't matter. It hadn't blinked anything but nitrogen monoxide signal in days. By sunset, we were down to 3, and then to 2. Lena disappeared sometime in the night. Her sleeping bag was empty, her shoes gone. No sign of struggle, just ... gone. Like she stood up quietly, stepped outside, and walked off into the dark without telling us. We searched for hours, screaming her name into the fog. Only once did something scream back. It didn't sound like her. It didn't sound human. We left camp the next morning. Left the tents, the food, everything. We just walked. Followed the stream. It didn't matter if it was the right way. We couldn't stay. Every time we stopped, we felt it again. That watching. That slow circling of something just outside the trees. Never close. Never visible. But always just behind us. Jamie stopped responding on the 2nd day of walking. He wasn't catatonic, just ... distant. Like the forest had reached inside him and turned something off. By the 3rd day, I was alone. When I was found, after nearly a week, I was 37 miles off any marked trail. A search team had picked up the beacon signal only after a heavy storm cleared. They told me I was lucky to be alive, but I never told them everything. I never told them about Connor's boots reappearing again, this time beside my tent, or the muddy footprints we kept finding around the fire, circling us in tighter loops each night. I never told them about the last time I saw Jamie, the way he stood perfectly still beside a tree, like he was waiting for something to give him permission to move again. I left that part out, because some things follow you back, even if they never show their face, and I haven't slept through a night since. We weren't supposed to hike that far. The trail we picked was marked as moderate, just a 3-day loop through the forest and back to the same ranger station we left from. But somewhere after the 2nd ridge, we veered off. It didn't feel like a mistake at the time. The air was clear, the canopy above us heavy, but beautiful, and the light filtering through the pines made everything look golden. We just kept going. There were 4 of us, and nobody really questioned the distance. Not until it started getting dark. We found the campsite by accident. It was tucked into a small clearing, barely visible from the trail. I only noticed it because of the glint of metal in the underbrush, a pot hanging from a folding tripod above a bed of cooled ashes, still steaming faintly, the kind of heat you see right after someone dumps water on a fire. The site was complete. 2 tents, both zipped. A camp chair tilted slightly back with a tin mug resting on the arm. There was still liquid inside, warm to the touch. At first, we thought someone must still be nearby. Maybe they'd gone off to find firewood. Maybe they were just down by the river. But when we stepped closer, things stopped making sense. The sleeping bag inside one of the tents was laid out like someone had just gotten up from it, but the fabric was dusty, like it hadn't been touched in weeks. A layer of dry leaves had gathered at the corners. The second tent was collapsed, half buried under pine needles. The food bags were hung from a tree branch, but the rope had started to fray with time. It was like whoever had been here had just stepped away moments ago, and also hadn't been back in months. None of us said what we were thinking, that the warm mug didn't match the dust, that the burned-out fire still held heat, that everything looked staged. By then the sun had dropped below the ridge. It would have taken us hours to find another clearing, so we set up camp just a few yards away. We shouldn't have. That night I didn't sleep. None of us did, because around 2 a.m. I heard footsteps, slow, steady, crunching through the leaves between our tents. No flashlight, no voice, no sounds but those quiet, deliberate steps and the faint metallic clink of something being picked up from the old fire pit. And then, nothing. In the morning, everything was quiet again. No sign of footprints, no broken branches, just dew on the ground untouched, as if no one had moved through the area at all. But the mug was gone. The old one, the one that had been resting on the chair. The chair itself had shifted position, ever so slightly, now facing toward our tents instead of the fire pit. We all noticed it, but no one brought it up, not directly. Instead, we made excuses to pack quickly. I remembered tying my boots without looking anyone in the eye. We didn't eat, we didn't talk. We just kept moving. For the first few hours, the trail was steady. Then the markers disappeared. Not all at once, more like they were getting harder to see. The paint on the trees was faded, worn down to the barest smear of orange. Some had been scratched through. Others just weren't there anymore. By early afternoon, we realized we weren't following a trail at all. Just space between the trees that felt like a path. We stumbled on the second campsite around dusk. It was in worse shape than the first. Scattered gear, torn tent fabric, an old backpack that had clearly been soaked through and left to dry under the open sky. But everything was still there. The sleeping bags, the food wrappers, even a toothbrush stuck into the dirt beside a mossy log. And again, the fire was warm. Not burning, not glowing, just warm, like someone had poured water on it minutes before we arrived, but the site looked like it hadn't been touched in weeks. One of us, I think it was Mark, suggested we were walking in circles, but the terrain didn't match. The trees were different here, older, thicker, and the clearing wasn't shaped the same. Still, we didn't sleep there. We kept walking until we couldn't anymore. And even then, when we laid our gear down under the trees, I couldn't close my eyes, because I kept thinking about the mug, how it had vanished without a sound, and how, when I reached into my own pack that night to pull out my water bottle, I found that exact mug sitting neatly on top of my clothes, the same dents, the same scratch down the side. I dropped it, but I didn't tell the others, because part of me was starting to think that someone or something wanted us to stay. By the third night, we stopped pretending we were trying to get out. The forest wasn't letting us. We'd been walking all day without reaching a single landmark we recognized. No cliffs, no creeks, no ridge lines, just dense trees and the same soundless canopy that swallowed everything. Birds had stopped calling. Even the wind seemed to avoid us. We didn't talk anymore. We just walked, ate in silence, slept in shifts. No fire, That night, we didn't set up tents. We didn't even roll out our bags. We just laid down in our jackets, too tired to pretend we were in control of anything. I opened my eyes sometime after midnight. The woods weren't dark anymore. Not exactly lit, but dim, like a heavy overcast sky was glowing above us, even though the moon was gone. I sat up slowly, heart in my throat, and looked around. There were tents. Not ours. Not even from the earlier sites. New ones or old ones, I couldn't tell, dozens of them. Silent, colorless shapes, scattered between the trees like lumps of fabric left behind decades ago. Some were partially collapsed. Others were still zipped shut. And in front of each tent was a mug, identical to the one I found in my pack. I stood slowly and turned. We were back at the first site, the same chairs, the same tripod over the fire pit, the same ring of blackened stones. But there was no steam this time, no heat, just cold ashes. And lined up beside the fire were 4 mugs, one for each of us. Except now there were only 2 of us left. No one screamed, no one ran. I don't remember falling asleep, but in the morning I was alone, no footprints, no backpacks, no sign anyone else had ever been there. Just my mug half full, still warm